Local news, national news, even feel-good news. Delivering the topics that are relevant to you.
That's why I listen to Joe. He covers it all.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
All right, so what is the deal with the John Morgan billboards? I know you've seen them. I know Laurel hasn't. I asked Laurel before the show. I said, Laurel, have you seen I said to Laurel, what's the deal with the John Morgan billboards? And Laurel's like, what do you mean, what's the deal with the John Morgan?
I mean, I've seen that they're silly, but no. What you're talking about, nope.
So I think like every John Morgan billboard in the Orlando area has been vandalized. And I'm using finger quotes. If you're watching us in the chat room, you can see I'm using finger quotes. But all of the John Morgan billboards, and there's literally one right across the street from us, that is a vandalized John Morgan billboard. And as you're driving by right now, and as you're driving by one of these so-called vandalized John Morgan billboards, leave us an open mic or call us at 844-580-WDBO to tell us how it has been vandalized, what it reads now. And I'll give you an example, like the billboard that's right across the street from the radio station. It's a traditional, Morgan & Morgan billboard. And it says, for the people, and it has their website, forthepeople.com, and this, that, and the other. But like, and each vandalized billboard is vandalized in a different way. And again, I'm using finger quotes for vandalized because I have a theory about these billboards. But each one is vandalized in a slightly different way. And the one across the street from the radio station, as an example, it says, instead of saying for the people, it says for the money. And then it has someone painted I don't think it's painted, but somebody put a little ambulance there. And the ambulance so basically it implies he's an ambulance chaser. And I literally today saw 4 John Morgan billboards that were quote unquote vandalized. And I was looking in the Orlando Reddit thread today, and people were asking about it, and there was a number of theories there. Some people genuinely believe someone's climbing up onto these billboards and vandalizing them. I find that preposterous. I find that there's no possible way that somebody is climbing up there and vandalizing the billboards. I think instead, there's 2 other options. I think one is that the marketing team at Morgan & Morgan knows that this would get people talking about their billboards. This falls into the category of bad. There's no such thing as bad press, right? So any press is good press. And if people are talking about the Morgan & Morgan billboards, then that's a win for Morgan & Morgan. And that's my prevailing theory, though I have a second thought. And that is, what if it was like Dan Newland who was putting up these billboards? What if it was another one of the Orlando area attorneys who was putting up these billboards? But then I wonder about things like copyright and those kinds of issues as to whether or not you'd be even allowed to put up a billboard like that. Because honestly, some of them, some of the vandalizations of them are kind of demeaning to John Morgan and Morgan & Morgan. Implying that they're ambulance chasers, saying for the money, and some of the others. But let us know if you're driving by one of those billboards right now, which I'm pretty sure you are because they're all over the place. If you're driving by one of the so-called vandalized Morgan & Morgan billboards right now, hit us up in the open mic or call us up. The open mic is a feature of the WDBO app. So just open up the WDBO app, tap the open mic button, and you can talk, and then just tell us what the billboard says and what your prevailing theory is on that. Or you can call 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. Sean is joining us in Winter Park. You're up first. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Good, Joe. How you doing today, man?
Good. Have you seen one of those billboards?
Yes, I have. I saw the one on I-4 right before the rest area there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you remember what it said or how it was altered?
Yeah, it was. They had a big clown nose painted on John Morgan with the curly clown.
The clown hair, too, right?
Hair.
Yeah.
And then they crossed out Morgan and put in Fool.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's demeaning to Morgan and Morgan, but do you think it's just to get what we're doing right here, right now, to get us talking about it? And by the way, let me fully disclaim, I have never taken $1 from Morgan and Morgan. I don't endorse Morgan and Morgan. I don't have a relationship with Morgan and Morgan. I've never even met John Morgan or any of the Morgan and Morgans. And no one put me up to this. But it's just those. As I was driving around today, I just couldn't help but to notice all those billboards, and I'm intrigued by them. I'm hooked.
Yeah, I think mission accomplished, because look at exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sean, thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate that. Kevin is in Orlando. You're on WDBO. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I just saw one of the I-4 by Kirkman, I think it was. I'm traveling east, and there was some stuff on it, nothing graphic or anything. But you know what? There's another theory. You know, this guy was a big Dem supporter.
Still is.
And maybe still is. I mean, he held fundraisers for Obama at his mansion here.
Yep.
So who knows? The way things are going, as much as you know how pissed off people are with what's going on, who knows? You know what I mean? That could be motivation enough for this guy.
So you're saying
bring him down a peg or two.
So you're saying that it is possible that those are genuinely being vandalized?
Well, I kind of agree with your theory, too. Like, I put nothing past these types of people that would do this on their own.
Right.
To bring attention. And what's better than that? Free advertisement. Right?
Yeah.
Free. He's getting hundreds of thousands of free airtime. You know? I mean, not that he's a cheap state or anything, but...
We're playing right into his master plan, aren't we? Because we're talking about it.
These people are devious, bro.
Kevin,
I'm serious.
I appreciate your call, man. Thank you so much. And you know, this is not the first time a Morgan & Morgan billboard has been vandalized. Paul Cross, do you remember when there was a Morgan & Morgan billboard and somebody had altered it to a Captain Morgan billboard, and it showed John Morgan with his knee up, you know, on the barrel of rum or whatever it is? I don't know what Captain Morgan.
Absolutely.
I don't know what liquor that is.
2015,
spiced rum.
2015 or so is when they started with this, and it was all part of the plan. It was all part of my billboards are becoming wallpaper. Nobody's really paying attention to them. Let me go up there, go ahead and black out one of my teeth. So this started in about 2015 or so, and it became so successful because idiots like you and I are talking about it right now without him paying a dime to be on this radio station. And so this is what happens. I mean, he gets the publicity, he gets the press, and people notice it. Because how many times have you put a sign on the wall, either at your workplace or at home, saying blah, 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 and it sits there and it gets attention for the first few days, and after a while, nobody even realizes it's there.
You know, it's funny.
This is what he's doing.
I've got a Christian quote. I've got a scriptural quote on my desk in my office, and I almost never look at it because you're right. It's become wallpaper to me, and it's the same as having a stapler and a roll of tape on my desk. Yeah, that's very.
And I didn't mean to call you an idiot because I'm an idiot. You're not.
Yeah,
you're the one.
Oh no, I'm an idiot. I get it.
But this is just a strategic way to get people to notice it, to talk about it. He doesn't care whether people think he's a clown or not. He's just sitting on his hill of gold and counting money, you know?
Hey, hang on, I've got a John from Maitland on hold. I know that John Morgan has a home as an estate in Maitland. I doubt that's John. I doubt that's John Morgan calling. John in Maitland, you're on WDBO. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good, how are you? You're not John Morgan, right? You're not John Morgan, right?
No. Nope, John Nelson here, Maitland.
Okay.
It makes sense that looking at these billboards, I've seen a couple of them. This looks like someone is purposely up there doing this so that good Republicans such as yourself will talk about these Democrats.
You might, yeah. I think that is a very real possibility. And even I'm a little surprised, like the Captain Morgan one. at least that was still kind of funny and didn't really demean John Morgan. But when you see the ambulance on the billboard, ambulance chaser and for the money, I mean, those are kind of demeaning to John Morgan. It kind of surprises me that he would sign off on something like that. Like I said, I've never met the guy, but I get the sense that he's got a pretty healthy ego. A lot of us do. And it just surprises me a bit that he would allow or maybe inspire, maybe be the person who said, let's do this, to have something that's a bit demeaning to him. Ivan is in Orlando. You're on WDBO, the Joe Kelley Show. Hi, Ivan.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The worst one I've seen was up in Volusia County, and some insidious person, they put a very buff 25-year-old man's body with John Morgan's head on it. That was the most over-the-top, ridiculous. Oh, it was horrible.
Now, that one, and shirtless, right? And that one is... Yes. But that's not even one of the vandalized ones. That's one of their actual marketing billboards. And I think that is so bizarre to see John Morgan's head photoshopped onto a ripped young man's body. I mean, that is unsettling. It's very unnerving to see that when you're driving around. And then, of course, there's the ones, there's ones where he's in an astronaut helmet and stuff like that, and that's fine. But
Santa Claus.
Yeah, but photoshopping onto a young athletic man's body, because we all know what John Morgan looks like. We know that when John Morgan takes his shirt off, he doesn't look like that. And what I find really interesting, and I'm going to go back to this, is that Laurel is unaware of this. And I'm not knocking on you, Laurel, because I went into Josh's office. Josh, what's his name? Josh
McCarthy.
Yeah, that's the guy.
That guy.
And I went to Josh's office, and I says, Josh, what do you make of these Morgan to Morgan billboards? He said, what do you mean? I said, the vandalized ones. He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, God, you don't look. Do you guys not look around while you're driving?
And you think I would, because I have a 40 to 50 minute commute there and to work and back every day. And yet, I guess I don't. I thought I did, but apparently I don't.
All right, you can join us 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. Use the open mic in the WDBO app if you're just joining us. Coming up next on the Joe Kelley Show, all the stories, the headlines that you missed while you're at work today. We'll have it all for you. We'll get you completely caught up on what you need to know coming up next on the Joe Kelley Show.
Amplify your career through training and development solutions specifically designed for federal government professionals. From courses to help you attain or retain certification, to individualized coaching services, to programs that hone your leadership skills and business acumen, Management Concepts optimizes your professional development. Online, in person, individually, or groups, it's training that's measurably better. Learn more at managementconcepts.com. That's managementconcepts.com.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk.
I'm Joe Kelley on WDBO. If you're just joining us, if you've just maybe hopped into your car where your carmometer likely reads about 108 degrees right now, could be as hot as 113 degrees on your carmometer. But if you've been busy all day today, like a lot of people have, you've been busy working in your cubicle farm, maybe you've been out on your real farm, maybe you've been down in the coal mines, maybe you've been on the factory floor, whatever it is you do for a living. If you have missed all those things that have happened throughout the day today, we're going to get you caught up right now on all the headlines that you missed. The New York Times had this story 9 hours ago. This is a big deal in the fashion industry, evidently, an $8.5 billion luxury brand merger. Tapestry, which owns Coach and Kate Spade, agreed to buy Capri, which owns Versace and Michael Kors. 8 hours ago, CNN had this story about the inflation, U.S. inflation rising in July for the first time in a year. The cost of grocery, gas, and rent continues to weigh on Americans. 6 hours ago, ABC reported that former President Trump and his aide, Walt Nauta, both pleaded not guilty to new charges in the classified documents probe. But staffer Carlos de Oliveira, still not arraigned. They say he's not arraigned because he still has not retained an attorney. which is weird that he doesn't hurry up and get an attorney then. By the way, this guy, Walt Nauta, has been referred to as an aide. He's been referred to as a valet and as Donald Trump's body guy. That's all the same thing. Basically, it's your personal assistant. ABC News had this report 5 hours ago. We had it here on WDBO. Virgin Galactic launches their first mission carrying paying customers to space weeks after the company's first flight in June. 5 hours ago, Associated Press reported, get this, President Joe Biden will ask Congress to provide another $13 billion in emergency aid to Ukraine, another massive infusion of cash as the Russian invasion wears on. Just a few hours ago. 4 hours ago, NBC reported, this is an interesting story, 5 Americans who've been held captive in Iran have been moved to house arrest in the first step of a planned prisoner swap. So we're going to be swapping 5 Americans in Iran with presumably some Iranians. The New York Times had this story just 1 hour ago. Prosecutors overseeing the indictment of Donald Trump on charges of conspiring to overturn the 2020 election ask a judge to set a trial date for early January. CNN had the story just an hour ago. The Supreme Court blocks a $6 billion Purdue Pharma bankruptcy settlement that would protect the Sackler family from opioid-related civil claims. And lastly, just 12 minutes ago, NBC News reported that the dock worker, the black dock worker in Alabama, Damian Pickett, says he hung on for dear life as he was pummeled by a group of white boaters in Montgomery who disregarded his requests to move their boat, that according to a handwritten account that Pickett filed with law enforcement. And I do have a picture of the billboard that is across the street from the radio station right now. And it reads, America's largest injury law firm for the people, but somebody scratched out for, and it reads chase the people. And then they've put an ambulance on there with dollar signs coming out of the ambulance. So, implying that John Morgan is an ambulance chaser. So, again, I find it interesting that if it is, in fact, John Morgan and the Morgan & Morgan marketing team that is, quote unquote, vandalizing these billboards, I find it interesting that they're using kind of demeaning things. I mean, things that generally most people would be like, oh, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that about me on a billboard somewhere.
There's one on I-4 heading west that says, fool the people, and they painted a jester hat on John Morgan. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, and they're consistent. I mean, it seems like all of the Morgan & Morgan billboards have been, quote unquote, vandalized.
Saw one in Leesburg. For the money? Not wrong.
Hi, Joe. Terry here.
Hi, Terry.
I'm on Lee Road in Edgewater. The sign here for Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, for the people, but for has been blacked out, and it says Chase in red underneath it. Have a great day.
Yeah, I just find this to be really, really interesting, and I'd love to know what the true story is behind it. If anybody works at Morgan & Morgan, let us know. Hit us up. 844-580-WDBO. 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. We will continue. By the way, coming up, why does Florida have a panhandle? Hang on, it's an interesting answer. We're going to get to why Florida has a panhandle. That'll be coming up as well. Stay with us.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. Breaking news to lively debates, covering the issues that matter to you.
I make it a point to listen to Joe Kelley when I need to fully understand what's happening in the news.
Now, the Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's news and talk, WDBO.
It is so hot. A friend of mine who has backyard chickens told me that one of his chickens laid an omelet today. Because that's how hot it is.
A hard-boiled egg? Laid a hard-boiled egg.
So hot outside. It's, oh my gosh. Even the mosquitoes are carrying canteens right now. It is so hot outside. It's unbelievable. All right, we're talking about, it's a very important topic right now. We're talking about these billboards around town. I firmly believe, and we did a little bit of research here and went back to 2015. We found a story in the Tampa Bay Times from 2015 when there was some vandalized John Morgan billboards, and the article basically said what I had theorized, in that is that it is done deliberately. It's the Morgan & Morgan people doing that deliberately so that people like us will talk about it. So that seems to be the prevailing mindset on it, though. Though the billboard right out in front of the radio station that has the vandalized John Morgan. Do you know what the billboard is on the flip side of it? Can you take a guess?
Dan Newland.
Yep. That's the billboard on the flip side of it. If you look on the other side, it's Dan Newland on the other side. So it is. That was my other theory. My other theory was that Dan Newland was buying the Morgan & Morgan billboards and putting up vandalized ones.
Hey, Joe, this is James in Deltona. Corner of 434 and Ronald Reagan Boulevard, Taco Bell. You get in their drive-thru, you're looking right at the billboard of John Morgan, biggest law firm in the universe, and he's in the space outfit, and he spray painted his orange hair like yellow and wrote like "fool" over Morgan in like yellow spray paint. Looked professional, though.
And somebody had vandalized one of them to look like a Tampa Bay Buccaneer logo a while back. I remember that. And, Jen, I guess what really surprises me about this is, as I have said, that some of those comments, some of the alterations that they've made to these billboards are very unflattering. I mean, to imply that they're ambulance chasers. I mean, that to me is so unflattering that it kind of surprises me that they take the any news is good news, there's no such thing as bad news so far.
Yeah, we all know John Morgan loves the camera, but those billboards are ridiculous. Then he does those UFC commercials.
Oh, I've not seen USC commercials. Have you seen USC commercials?
No,
ring a bell at all?
Those.
I haven't either.
Hey, Joe. Hope you're having a great day. The first theory on John Morgan, the false flag, I doubt it. The second theory, way too many legal implications. Trust me, somebody climbed up there. They're either an artist trying to get attention or a client that lost money to John Morgan. They feel betrayed. It's something like that. Either way, they're young to get up there. If I were John Morgan, I'd be putting trail cams on all of my billboards and catch those guys. When I was a kid, I could climb up those things all day long, just like a monkey.
Just like a monkey. We're not kids anymore, my friends. It's not as easy to climb up on those billboards anymore. And I'll tell you, if they were truly vandalized, if this was not part of the marketing campaign, I think this is the biggest tell right here. If they were truly vandalized, you bet your sweet patootie that John Morgan and his team would be on the phone with the billboard company saying, get those billboards down immediately. And they would jump at a moment's notice because he spends a ton of money on billboards. And there is just absolutely no way that the billboard owners would allow that to happen.
Well, it is 2023. Anything Morgan should have a camera on it by now.
Right. Again, I totally agree. In fact, when we buy billboards, when WDBO buys billboards, we always get what's called proof of performance. We always get a picture of the billboard from the billboard company so that they can, again, prove to us that they have fulfilled their obligation and put the billboard up. So these are cameras that are on the billboard. This is not like the billboard installer taking a picture with his phone and then sending it to us. Because especially on the digital billboards, the digital ones, the electronic ones that change every, 10, 12 seconds or so. We get pictures of those sent to us when those are on. So I think they've got pictures there anyway. So Florida has a panhandle. You guys ever go up to the panhandle? You ever spend much time in the panhandle?
No, and I really want to. I hear Destin's incredible, and I want to go up, but I just haven't yet.
So I saw this video on TikTok today, and I know that TikTok is mostly for scantily clad 20-year-old girls for them or about them. I'm not sure which, but every now and again, there is something that's kind of interesting and educational on TikTok. And I found this to be interesting. Of course, I'm not a lifelong Floridian, so I don't know the geography, the history of the geography of Florida. And so this is a 90-second video from which you'll hear the audio, obviously. Unless you look really close at your radio, you might be able to see this. Turn your head kind of sideways like that, and you'll be able to see it. But this is a 90-second explainer for why we have a panhandle in Florida. I thought this was interesting.
Most Americans don't know why Florida has this strange panhandle. With all of Florida's main cities located on the peninsula, what could be going on here that's so important to where Florida needed to steal this land from Alabama, and why does it just stop here? Long before Florida was actually a U.S. state, La Florida Territory belonged to the Spanish, and the Louisiana Territory belonged to the French. The Louisiana Territory eventually became the Mississippi Territory once the French and Indian War ended, giving the land to Britain. Once Britain had control of this land, the Mississippi Territory began splitting up into different U.S. states. La Florida was still owned by Spain and was split up between West Florida and East Florida. English settlers in Western Florida wanted to become part of Alabama once they saw the benefits of living in a U.S. state, and they felt also much more connected to this part of the country. Western Florida was underdeveloped and didn't have any railways or roads connecting itself to Eastern Florida because the swamps and dense forests were very hard to travel through. In 1864, Florida, now a U.S. state, finally had a vote on if they should give Western Florida to Alabama, and although 64% of Floridians voted yes, Alabama rejected the offer because they would have had to buy Western Florida for $1 million, which would have been equal to $22 million today. Western Florida tried joining Alabama 11 different times in a roughly 100-year span because of how isolated they felt, but finally in 1883, a Pensacola and Atlantic Ocean Railway connected much of West Florida to the rest of the state, slowing the talks of splitting off, well, at least for now.
At least for now. So there you go, 90 seconds explanation for why we have a panhandle. So now you can say you learned something on the Joe Kelley Show.
I expected to hear like a sing-along song and like Schoolhouse Rock of why Florida has a panhandle.
Yes. That would be cool now, wouldn't it? By the way, I don't know who Lee Leland is, but I love Lee Leland. Lee Leland has already made a donation to our Make-A-Wish Wish-A-Thon, which is not till August 25th. So thank you, Lee Leland, for making a donation. If you'd like to make a donation to Make-A-Wish, guys, you know what Make-A-Wish does. They make wishes come true for children with critical illnesses. Your money stays right here in Central Florida. You can make a donation. The event itself is coming up Friday, August 25th. That's our Wish-A-Thon. That'll be a day-long broadcast, 10 hours, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. We'll be out at Urban Air Adventure. That's a trampoline park. It's brand new. There's two of them in the Orlando area. We're going to be at the Altamont Springs location, which is right next to Cranes Roost Park. And I will be there on the air continuously from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. Big, huge thanks and shout out to City Kia of Greater Orlando, our title sponsor this year. We appreciate their support and their help. You can open up the WDBU app right now, tap the Make-A-Wish button for Wish-A-Thon details, and if you'd like to make a donation. And again, you can donate anonymously. You don't have to put your name, but I love it when people put their names. And Lee Leland made a donation and put his name. And, man, I am just grateful beyond words. Way to go, Lee. Isn't that cool?
That's awesome. Very cool.
So cool to step up. And, man, I know that times are financially troublesome. Man, I heard a statistic earlier on the Eric Erickson show. I listen to WDBO pretty much all day. But Erickson was talking about how for most families, if you're trying to just pay your rent, your car note, your college education, and your food bills, that you would have to work, 53 weeks out of the year to earn that kind of money or to be able to pay those things. Well, there aren't 53 weeks in a year, and so we're all falling behind financially. But that doesn't mean that the need decreases for children who are diagnosed every single day with a critical illness. And that is why the mission of Make-A-Wish is so important to me, and it's so important to our radio station. And we're just thrilled to be able to share these stories with you of these families who have benefited from Make-A-Wish and really benefited from you, from your donations, the donations that you made last year, the year before that, and the year before that, because of your generosity, be it $1 or $5 or $10 or $1,000, $10,000, no matter what it is, it helps. It all helps. And don't think that we have big money donors lined up that are going to step up and, save the day. We don't. We don't have that. We don't have a big foundation that is standing back in the shadows, ready to write us a big, fat, whopping check. All of our money comes from you, right there in your car. You are the people who make it happen for Make-A-Wish. So just tap that button in the WDBO app. It's the Make-A-Wish button in the WDBO app. If you want to find out more, you can make a donation today. I'll be making my donation. I have every year I donate $1,000 of my money to Make-A-Wish, and I will do so again this year. I will make sure I talk to my wife about it. Hey, honey, I'm going to take $1,000 out of the account. But, think about it, pray about it. I always think it's important to pray about things before you make big purchases, and pray about it and talk to your family about it. Maybe talk to your coworkers if you guys want to get your work involved with it. If you want to do your own fundraiser that helps contribute to our Wish-a-thon, that would be fantastic. Again, the 5th annual WDBO Make-A-Wish Wish-a-thon is coming up Friday, August 25th. I'm Joe Kelley. You're listening to The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. Join the conversation now by using the open mic in the WDBO app. Now, The Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's News and Talk, WDBO.
By the way, I don't know if you heard Brian Kilmeade had a guest on earlier today. His name is Paul Sperry. Here's a hashtag fun fact. Paul Sperry is my cousin. Isn't that weird? So my cousin is an absolutely brilliant journalist and investigative reporter, and he's absolutely brilliant. I should have him on sometime. I used to have him on all the time, but I don't know why. I don't know why I stopped having him on. But I'll reach out to him and see how he's doing. But yeah, dude's my cousin. So Peter Ducey is back on the job. He was gone for like a month. I think he was on just regular vacation. But Peter Ducey's back, and he asked a question of President Biden today. And, man, Biden just hates Peter Ducey. Biden hates anybody who challenges Joe Biden. Listen to this.
There's this testimony now where one of your son's former business associates is claiming that you were on speakerphone a lot with them talking business. Is that what?
Never talk business to anybody. And I knew you'd have a lousy question.
Well, why is that a lousy question?
Because it's not true.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And you can hear his handlers, saying, thank you, okay, goodbye, thank you, okay, goodbye, move along, okay, thank you, goodbye. Just so much contempt from the president for anybody that dare ask an off-script question for him. I'm Joe Kelley. This is The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Now, WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Triple Team Traffic.
I-4 westbound, lots of brake lights through Lake Mary and then par on to the 408. Sand Lake to 535, 192 into Champions Gate. We flip that around, and on the eastbound side, you'll find very much some heavy slowing past the Disney exits. Looks okay through downtown, but then par to Lee and 46A to the bridge. This report sponsored by HCA Florida Healthcare. Sharp stomach pain, advice is here. Consultant Nurse answers advice around the clock. Consultant Nurse, HCA Florida Healthcare. They show up for you. Call 844-706-8773. It's free. From the WDBO Triple Team Traffic Center, I'm Paul Cross.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Orlando's News and Talk. talk and discussion on the latest breaking national news.
Crude oil prices continue to fall.
Local news.
You're not going to have Disney have its own government in Central Florida.
And stories that matter to you. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let your voice be heard on The Joe Kelley Show.
All right, I'm going to talk about one of my all-time favorite topics. No, not me. Though that is one of my favorite topics, if I'm being honest here. One of my all-time favorite topics, I'm going to talk about radio. I love radio. I love being on the radio. I love listening to radio. I love thinking about listening to the radio. I love thinking about being on the radio. I love talking about radio. I love radio, and I want a candid conversation about radio listening.
I had a question for you, and
Yes.
that is, what do you really feel about radio? Do you like radio?
Love radio. Radio is the greatest thing since, I remember as a little kid, I had to have been, hang on, I gotta do backwards math or subtraction, I guess it's called.
I think you and I are probably the same on this, too.
Backwards math. I remember when I was like 10 years old, and I remember going to bed at night, and, my parents would say goodnight, and I had a radio in my room. And at the time, I lived in Seattle, Washington, and I would turn on KJR radio, and at nighttime, they did like this, I don't even know what it was called, but they did some sort of mystery science theater type production at night. It was scary. And I remember every night I would just get scared as a little kid listening to this, but I couldn't stop listening. And that was the first time I fell in love with radio. And ever since I was like 10 years old, I thought radio was the greatest thing ever. And then that fateful moment happened in my life when I was 15 years old, and I was in my high school journalism class, and the phone rang. Now, this was before cell phones. This is before everybody had a phone everywhere. And most classrooms didn't even have phones in them. Because it was a journalism classroom, we were allowed to have a phone. So we had a wired phone in the classroom that had a rotary dial on it. And the phone rang one day in the middle of class, and everybody was being loud and misbehaving. Our teacher in that particular class, you know how there's a teacher in every school that sleeps with students? I mean, that happens, right? In my experience, it was the journalism teacher at my high school. She was the one that slept with students, not me. But so that gives you an idea of what kind of. So the classroom was out of control. Nobody was behaving. Everybody was being loud and boisterous, and the phone was ringing. And I'm looking around thinking, why isn't anybody going to answer the phone? It's not my job to answer the phone, but all right, fine, I'll answer the phone. I answered the damn phone, and it was a radio station program director looking for interns, kids who wanted to come work for free. They say that opportunity knocks, but for me, it called on the phone. And that was when I was 15 years old. I'm 55 now. I have done nothing but radio since I was 15 years old. I wasn't even old enough to make a conscious decision of what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. My brain wasn't fully, I'm not sure my brain is still fully developed, but you get the idea. And they said, do you want to be on the radio? I'm like, do I want to be on the radio? Are you kidding me? Of course I want to be on the radio. And that continued my love affair with radio, and I love being on the radio. If you ever get a chance to work in radio, I jump on the opportunity. But I bring it up not to tell my story, and I'm sorry I got sidetracked. I did end up talking about me, didn't I? I did end up talking about my favorite subject. Damn it! I meant to talk about my
fault.
My second
fault.
favorite subject, radio. All right, so I've got some new stats on radio, and for Paul and Laurel, do you guys, and be again candid, be honest with me. I mean, how much time do you spend listening to the radio versus, say, listening to a streaming platform in your car, for music? Like in my car, I can get YouTube music. I can listen to Spotify. I don't have satellite radio. Satellite radio in my world is like the devil, so I don't do satellite radio.
When I didn't have my new truck, I listened to radio constantly. 'Cause
Broadcast
that's what
radio.
Yeah. Because that's what came through the best.
Right.
My new truck is a little different, but yeah, I used to listen nonstop.
And what do you listen to now?
Nothing.
No,
the devil.
The devil. I do.
Is it,
I listen
is
to
it the devil?
Or my phone. Yeah.
So satellite radio.
Yeah.
You have satellite radio?
I do.
Yeah. How about that? What about you, PC?
About 50% of the time, I scan. I'm a scanner. It drives my wife and people
But I'm sorry, but
crazy
scanning
'cause
between
I will
what?
scan. Radio stations. I go scanning between radio stations. I want to hear what they're saying.
Okay, but
how they're
it's
talking.
still
I wanna
broad.
hear their
It's
formats.
But it's broadcast radio.
It's broadcast radio, but it's 50% of the time. I also subscribe to the Devil's, earpiece, which is the, and I never did. I didn't have any of that satellite stuff until about a year ago when it came free in my car.
Exactly.
And that was like, getting me hooked on drugs. It's what they do. They give it to you a little taste for free.
Well, the devil always
but
comes.
I'm still trying to be very loyal to broadcast radio because I just love the local aspect of broadcast radio. That's why I love your show, Joe Kelley.
Oh, you're nice save. Nice. Very nice attempt at a save there. All right, so I was reading one of the trades. That's what we call it in the business, right? I was reading one of our trade magazines, Inside Radio, and it had an interesting study on listening habits for Americans, for people in the United States. AM/FM radio is the top audio source in America with double the time spent listening with any other audio platform. Because I know people that are like, oh, dude, no one listens to radio. Everyone listens to podcasts, or, oh, everyone's on satellite radio. And AM/FM radio was and is king when it comes to audio sources of listening. So AM/FM radio is hands down number one. Edison Research did this. Broadcast radio, including over-the-air and online listening. So that would include, like, if you're listening at WDBO.com, even though it's a stream, it is a stream of a broadcast radio station. So that still counts as radio. Over-the-air and online listening captured 36% of all audio usage in all locations among all Americans aged 13 and older. That is down 1 percentage point from the previous quarter. Streaming music, including Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and similar services, came in second place at 18%. So 36% for broadcast radio, 18% for any of the streaming devices. YouTube for music is third at 14%, followed by podcasts. Podcasts is in 4th%. It gained 1 point to what is now an all-time high for them of 10% of listening. So podcasts get 10% of listening. Broadcast radio, 36% of listening. Next was The Devil, Sirius XM at 8%. And that, for all that they have spent on that, for as much money as they've poured into satellite radio, for as much as, they've literally put satellites up in low Earth orbit for this. The satellites, I don't know what they are now, but the first 2 satellites that they launched were called, does anybody remember what they were called?
No.
One satellite was called Rock. The other satellite was called Roll. Yes. Yes. And audiobooks. I told you I got into an Uber yesterday or day before, whatever it was, and the guy was listening to an audiobook,
I used to
Harry
listen to
Potter.
audiobooks a lot, like only, actually, for a while.
Audiobooks have gained 1 percentage point to now get 3% of listening. Tied with TV music channels. So what would you consider to be TV music channels? Because that's not MTV, VH1, right?
Oh.
Is that because on some TV systems and cable systems, you'll get music channels on there as well.
Music choice, things like that are coming on. They're on Comcast, they're on Cox, they're on Infinity, they're whatever, they're on DirecTV. You get all that whole block of music channels to listen to as well.
So I'm curious about you. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326, or use the open mic in the WDBO app. What do you listen to? What do you listen to for audio devices? Are you a big podcast guy? I listen to some podcasts, and for a while I was listening to more. But when I lived in downtown Orlando, the drive to work was so short that I really wouldn't want to start any podcasts because I would never be able to finish it. And then by the time I got back into my car, I'd be like, oh, where did I leave off? And, oh, I forgot about that. And then so I just really kind of tuned out of podcasts. And if I'm being honest, a lot of times when I'm not listening to radio, and I would say I listen to radio 98% of the time, but for the 2% of the time, I'm listening to podcasts. And they are generally church sermon podcasts. So I've got several, maybe a half a dozen preachers that I really enjoy their sermons, and I will listen to a sermon pretty regularly, oftentimes on my way home, just as a buffer between, being excited on the radio for 2 hours, because I get excited about being on the radio. I love doing this. I love being on the radio. And sometimes when the clock ticks 7 and suddenly the show is instantly over, making that transition from 2 hours of pure adrenaline and excitement to suddenly now, oh my gosh, it's over. What do I do with my life until tomorrow at 5 p.m., But
that's one of the things that I love about you and that comes out over the radio is the fact that you've been in this business 40 years and you can still hear how excited and passionate you are about what you do. And that's a huge thing, Joe. It really is.
I appreciate that. Honestly, my biggest fear is that one of these days I'd have to get a real job. And I have never had a real job in my life.
You've never done anything but this. Nothing.
Well, ever. I had 3 other jobs when I was a teenager.
When you start working in radio, you end up having 2 or 3 jobs until you can, settle into that radio job. You never give that up.
I just got the eye roll from Laurel on the in the chat room because she knows what 3 jobs I've had.
Yeah, you kinda.
I had 3 jobs. So at different times, I was a grocery store clerk. When I was a teenager, when I was like 15, 16 years old, so I was a grocery store stalker at a wholesale grocery outlet or a big box one. I was also a summer camp counselor for the Boy Scouts. Does that even count as a job? I don't know if that counts as a job.
Were you paid for it?
Yes, I was.
Oh, okay. Well,
so that's a job.
Yeah.
And then I was a stevedore. For a couple summers. Look that one up. That was an interesting job. I honestly thought I was going to die being a stevedore. I think people have died.
Now I have to see what that is.
Doing stevedore. Stevedore is such a cool sounding name. It sounds so proper and so awesome. But then when you find out what a stevedore actually does, you're like, oh, that sucks. I wouldn't want to be a stevedore. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be a stevedore either. 844-580-WDBO. I want to know about your listening habits. What do you listen to? 844-580-WDBO. Or use the open mic in the WDBO app.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. In-depth segments on topics that matter to Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
I love your show every night. You're doing great, bud.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. We are talking about radio and what you listen to, as a new survey is out now that says with 36% of all listening, AM/FM radio is still the top audio source in the United States. The next one, number 2 on the list, after broadcast radio, is streaming platforms like Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and other services. That came in second place at 18%. 18%. I am a big radio fan. I listen to a lot of radio, but every now and again I'll put on a podcast. Every now and again I'll put on a podcast of somebody else's radio show. Just if I want to hear what someone else is doing in radio. I mean, there's just so much great radio to listen to.
Hey, Joe. I'm listening to the Mark Levin podcasts on the weekends, but during the week, it's constant broadcast radio. That's what we listen to. That's what everybody I know listens to. No brainer.
And obviously, we appreciate that very much. And you know, it's the old adage of word of my demise has been greatly exaggerated. You know, people have been predicting that radio was going to go away for a very long time. People have been writing radio's obituary for a very long time, and we're a resilient bunch of SOBs, and we just refuse to give up, and we're going to keep plugging and chugging until the day we all die. So we're not going to go anywhere. That I can absolutely promise you.
Now, wait a minute. Joe.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
What's a percentage of the time I listen to the radio versus anything else?
Yeah.
Joe, come on. When you are on the radio,
oh, stop.
That's when I'm listening.
Stop.
Okay? So it's 100% of the time when you are on the radio. Okay? So there.
I like her. Thank you very much.
When I was younger and a teenager in the 70s, I listened to nothing but music on the radio. Anything else, baseball, talking, the news, And then I came across this talk show called the Gene Burns Talk Show on WKIS. And I got hooked on talk shows and listening to the radio for conversation and for insight. So there you go.
You know, I think a lot of us have that moment in our lives when we grow up and we decide to find something slightly more stimulating on the radio than just music. And I will tell you that point came for me in 1996. In 1996 was when I switched from music radio to talk radio. I kind of followed the same path, unbeknownst to me, that Rush Limbaugh did. I mean, Rush Limbaugh started as a radio DJ, as did I. I started as a radio DJ. And in 1996, I got to the point where I said, I think I've played enough records. I've played enough music, and I need, because at that point I was actively listening to talk radio all the time. I loved it as a listener, and I thought, man, I think I can do this. And I will tell you, at the beginning, I was just absolutely terrible at it, as anybody is at the beginning of anything that they try. But you stick to it long enough and you'll get to be where I am right now, just mildly mediocre. I went from absolutely terrible to mediocre. So that's, at least that's something, right? 6:30 the time now. I'm Joe Kelley. Thank you for joining us here on The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. News, weather, traffic, all the things you want on your drive home. Plus, Joe Kelley being, well, Joe Kelley. Now, The Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's news and talk, WDBO.
You know, it is kind of ironic. We were just talking about this building a couple days ago because it's being converted into residential buildings. Because the commercial buildings in downtown are largely vacant. They have been vacant since the beginning of the pandemic. And there is a commercial real estate problem, quite frankly, in downtown Orlando and downtown everywhere America, as people have just generally not returned to work. Many of whom, perhaps most of whom, are still WFH, work from home. Yes, WFH. So we were talking about this building that's being converted. It's the building in downtown. It's right at the corner of Church Street and Orange Avenue. And it used to be where it's the building where there used to be a Wahlburgers there at the bottom floor. I'm just trying to pinpoint it so you guys know which building I'm talking about. It's not Wahlburgers anymore. That closed during the pandemic as well. It is now a taco and tequila place called Solita. I got to tell you, they got a great bar, great selection, great tacos. It's a nice place. And they regrettably now are completely covered by scaffolding. This poor restaurateur, they open up a brand new restaurant in that space, and then next thing you know, there's scaffolding going all the way to the roof of that building. And I was guesstimating that it's maybe a 15-story building. It's not as tall as like the 55 West, but it's not a short building either. It's about 15 stories or so. And it has scaffolding that goes all the way to the top, as they're, at least the last I heard, unless something has changed, but the last I heard was that they were going to be converting that from a commercial building to a residential building. And evidently there is a big problem with the scaffolding. And Laurel, we were talking about this in New York City. If you've ever been in New York City, you know that scaffolding is a part of life. It's a way of life in New York City.
It's everywhere and all the time.
Yes, and you're constantly walking under scaffolding. Every building is wrapped in scaffolding. I mean, they just seem to be constantly working on buildings in New York City. And so the scaffolding in and of itself didn't really faze me. But this restaurant, Salitas, has had to put up all these big banners saying, yes, we're open inside the construction, come on in. And again, I feel so bad for them. So I give them a free plug on the radio. Go try it. They make really good tacos and, like I said, a great bar there. And they're a fledgling restaurant there in downtown, and they could certainly use all the support that they can get. But the problem is, they had to evacuate the building, presumably that includes the restaurant, because somehow somebody noticed that the scaffolding looks unstable. And I drove by there 2 days ago, and when I looked at the scaffolding, I kind of thought the same thing. And not that I am an engineer in any way, shape, or form, but it just seemed like, man, that is a lot of scaffolding, and I would hate to walk underneath that. But it reminds me of the roller coaster ride at Carowinds. Remember when they said that they found a crack on it, and somebody found a crack, and then they had to shut it down? Well, somebody obviously spotted something in that scaffolding that didn't look quite right, and so there is a fear that the scaffolding could collapse. And consequently, they have closed several of those streets there to vehicle and pedestrian traffic just in case it does collapse. Now, of course, just in case it does collapse, I want to go downtown and fly my drone over it. I want to be able to capture it the moment that it does collapse. But just be mindful of that if you're making your way through downtown, that scaffolding around that building is being converted to residential, and there's a problem with the scaffolding. I would hate to be way up on the top of one of those scaffolding projects. Wouldn't you? It just doesn't seem like that would be really safe. I would be fearful of that. When was the last time you guys went out to eat? I will say I hit the McDonald's drive-thru today, and the number one combo, the Big Mac meal, was $10. $10 for a Big Mac, a medium fry, and a medium Coke. $10.
My husband and I went out to Red Lobster last night, and we got one entree, 2 sides, and like a Coke and a lemonade, and it came out to $70.
I mean, that is so insane.
That's because you get off at 7 o'clock and you miss the early bird stuff.
That's true.
You know? Because we used to just go, every time we'd go to dinner, we'd always go between 5 and 7, and they have really decent deals at that time. But you go after that, you're going to get hit hard on the cost.
I saw the story today in the Orlando Sentinel under the headline, "As Prices Rise, Some Restaurants See Fewer Customers." And restaurants across the country are continuing to raise prices and reporting fewer customers coming in their doors. The National Restaurant Association's June Restaurant Performance Index, 57% of operators reported a decline in traffic from last June. This was the third straight month of decline, leading the association to say that the current situation was dampened. Dampened. What an interesting word to choose for the Restaurant Association. Dampened. I got to tell you, I love, who doesn't love eating out, right? We all love eating out, but it has really hit the point at which it has become cost prohibitive. I mean, you can't go out to eat. I keep harping on that I paid $3.19 for a hash brown from McDonald's. Do I go to McDonald's too often? I'm starting to think that I go to McDonald's too often for a grown adult. No wonder I have health problems. I've got to stop going to McDonald's so often. So, I mean, it is nuts. Last night when I got home from work, I was really, really hungry. And, my wife doesn't like to eat this late. She doesn't, eating late is bad. But I generally stay awake later than she does. So I was like, I'm just going to eat a can of soup. There was a can of Progresso soup in the cupboard. And Laurel, how do I feel about soup?
You think it's not a meal.
Soup is not food,
yes,
right?
It is.
Soup is a drink. But as much as I don't like soup as a meal, that's what I had last night for dinner was a cheapo can of Progresso soup because it's too outrageously expensive. If you're a restaurant operator or if you're just a regular restaurant diner, I'd love to hear your story at 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326 or use the open mic in the WDBO app.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Only a test. If this had been an actual emergency, the attention signals you just heard would have been followed by important official information, news, or instruction. This concludes this test of the emergency alert system on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Connected to our community. Talk local issues and events with Joe Kelley. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let Joe know what interests you. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
All right, we're talking about the high prices at restaurants these days. Joining us now from Plant City is Skipper. And Skipper, I understand you're the owner of Sweet Missions Cafe there in Plant City. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, Joe.
So does this strike a chord with you when you hear about, these high prices? I mean, I would imagine you, like every other restaurateur, have had to jack up your prices in recent times.
We have on some items, Joe. We've tried to keep it as reasonable as possible, and we try to offer our families a lot of discounts and specials because, as you know, Plant City is a small agricultural town, and so we're trying to keep it as family-friendly as possible.
And it seems like most of the restaurants in Plant City are little small ma-and-pa type restaurants.
There's a few of us that have made it and survived. There's becoming more and more chain restaurants in Plant City.
Well, that kind of changes the landscape there a little bit. Are the prices rising because of the food products that you have to buy, or is it labor related?
It's food product prices. We've seen a major jump in just basics, flour, eggs, milk, things like that. Those kind of prices. We're a small family-owned, family-run business. We don't have a whole lot of overhead. All the labor is our family. And so most of our costs have been in just groceries and supplies.
And have you seen a change in your income in the last year or two? When it comes to customers coming into your restaurant.
Yes, sir. Especially this summer. This summer has been very slow for us. And in talking to other people in the Plant City area, most people seem to have taken a hit this summer. And most of us feel that it is due to the economy. Higher gas prices, higher basics of food, eggs, milk, things like that.
Skipper, I have exactly 60 seconds left in the show, and I want to give it to you to plug your restaurant. Tell me the best thing on your menu, the most popular item that people order.
Well, sir, thank you. We are family-owned, family-run. We do soup, salad, sandwiches. The number one seller is our chicken salad. It's my wife's recipe. And our next best seller would be our Spanish bean soup, followed by our pizzas.
Oh, wow. You've got a pretty broad menu.
Yes, sir. We also do a large variety of homemade desserts, again, using family recipes. The most popular dessert is my grandmother's chocolate cake. It's 3 generations old, and we sell that like crazy during the week.
And, Skipper, lastly, where would we find Sweet Missions Cafe?
We're located on James L. Redmond Parkway in Plant City, Florida, right near the Walmart.
That sounds fantastic. Skipper, I'm so glad you're listening, and I really appreciate that, and I'm so glad you called in and shared your story with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. You have a blessed day.
You too, buddy. 844-5. We don't have enough time for any more phone calls, and we don't have time for anything else. Thank you so much for being a part of the Joe Kelley Show here on WDBO.